Yeah, welcome to everyone today, and thanks for coming to our second part of the webinar around media. Today we're going to talk about media engagement, so building media relationships. We have Jackie Street and Emily Watkins, and myself, Anna Pimenta, and we also have Sarah Vella that also works for Landcare Victoria. I'd like to start the evening by acknowledging the country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work and meet today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. And in particular, the Gunai Kunai people, the traditional custodians of the lands on which I work today. Yeah, as I said, there's me today, Anna Pimenta. I'm the Landcare Development Coordinator. Some of you might have spoken to me a few times. Some of you might not know me. We also have our key presenters, as I mentioned before, Jackie Street and Emily Watkins from the Climate Media Centre. Emily was not with us last week. We had Rebecca, but she had to look after a dog that had some issues, but she's here today. And we're also going to have today a case study with Catherine van Wilgenberg. Hope that's okay, Catherine. And Catherine is a volunteer for a few groups. We've got Friends of Onenta Landcare, Tambu, Buff Landcare, Coastcare. And she also delivered the Keepers Project with Nanguna Landcare. So she volunteered and she's an artist. But we'll get to that later. So it's time for me to hand over. Before I hand over to Jackie, I'd like to thank our funding partners, so the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, for funding this webinar and others that we're doing this current financial year. Just some housekeeping. If you're using, there's not many of us, so we will probably take some verbal questions at the end, but in the meantime, during the presentation, if you want to write your questions in the chat, please do it. We've got either Emily or Jackie that can answer some of the questions as we go, but we'll get to more questions at the end. And now it is the right time to hand over to Jackie and to Emily. Thanks for coming today, Jackie and Emily.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. Thank you to everyone for being here, especially people who tuned in last week and thought, oh, gee, I can't get enough of that, Jackie. You got to tune in for the next installment. So big ups to everyone who's come back again. Just for those of you who weren't on last week, I used to be an ABC News journalist in a few places, and I'm back in Hobart where I grew up now. I am a media advisor with the Climate Media Centre, and my job mainly works around rural and regional stories and issues relating to climate. Emily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. Sorry I couldn't come last week dealing with my spoiled dog's broken tooth, but I'm really pleased to be here. I was a journalist for about 14 years and have been at the CMC for a couple of years now. And I, like Jackie mentioned earlier, I think mainly run our training program and work with a lot of grassroots groups working on climate action type things. So I'm delighted to be here.
And some of you will know Catherine, but she's going to do a special presentation or special chat with us. Catherine is the Director of Eco Art Systems Australia and also the Living Colour Studio Art and Architecture. She is an eco arts collaborator with Landcare, and she's going to talk about some of the experiences she's had getting media coverage. Here's some there already. This isn't specifically a Landcare story, that one there, but you can see, I just wanted to put that up because I just thought, Catherine, your art is amazing. And this was, Catherine, there was a bid, I think, to raise money to keep that artwork hanging. So do you want to explain, Catherine, about your art there? Or would you prefer?
Yes, this is a portrait of Bruce Pascoe. It's 2 meters by 2 meters. and it's made from Eucalyptus bassistoana, which was the central head area, which is actually bark from Bruce's own land in near Wallaga River near Malakuta, and the rest of the bark is actually from street trees from Altona, which is where I was living at the time when I made that portrait. And it's won a few prizes, and I'm really looking towards it being, you know, bought for a public institution because of Bruce's contribution to truth telling.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so a bit more about what we're going to get into today. You remember last week we covered a lot more of the sort of the basics of what is the media, what are we talking about when we're talking about climate in the media, some tips for interviews. This is a bit more about PR, I guess, which is about how and when to engage the media and when not to engage the media, how to be a good contact, how to pitch, how to get noticed by journalists, how to write a press release, and we're going to talk a bit about opinion pieces and letters. So a lot of the stuff when we're talking about pitching and being good contact, that's about getting in the news part of the paper, right? The front part of the paper or on the TV or the radio. Opinion pieces and letters are an editorial part of websites and papers, which is a different way of getting into the media. So we'll talk about that as well, because more than one way to skin a cat, team. Just to recap last week, you might remember, but this is kind of important to think about for our next segment, the media moments that we have. We have reactive moments where something's happening in the media. Maybe there's a giant arts grant that Catherine thinks, yahoo, this is going to be great for our town. Maybe there's, you know, an announcement of doubling of Landcare funding. Hooray. It could be a negative story as well. Something that's happening that we're going to respond to. We're going to insert ourselves. It's someone else's media moment, might be a government thing. It's an issue being discussed. It could be a flooding event, anything. And we're going to insert ourselves into that. That requires a lot more being proactive being reactive and contacting the media and inserting ourselves. We have to be quick with that one. Proactive is probably more what we're talking about today, which is you've got something to tell. You've got a story. You've got something great happening in your Landcare group. You want to let the media know about it. You're going to release your own content on your own time when it suits you and try and get the journalists interested by creating your own media moment. So that means that you have more time to figure out how you're going to organize your pitch and your materials. So when do you engage in the media? The main thing to think about is, do you have something relevant to say? Do you have something to say that aligns with your priorities? This is an issue in climate that we have a lot. You know, we have a lot of issues coming up that affect people in climate. There might be energy issues, there might be funding issues, there might be issues around nuclear power. If we go out and talk about this thing, is that really going to align with our priorities? Another really important thing is if you have something different, new, or unique to say. Are there other groups out there that are already saying the same thing? Are there other groups out there in your town already saying the same thing? If there are, the media might not be as interested to hear from you. But if there are groups out there saying different things, or you think that you are able to bring a perspective that hasn't been heard, and I think that's really the case a lot with Landcare, that's probably worthwhile thinking about engaging. Another thing we need to think about, we talked about last week about when not to do interviews. It's the same with this. We don't have to do media all the time, right? It's not compulsory. The media don't, if you never send that press release, if you write a press release and then you think at the last minute, oh, actually, no, the media don't know. Remember, it doesn't matter if you don't engage. Okay, you haven't lost anything necessarily, or the chance to maybe get your story across. But if the story doesn't align with your goals or your priorities of how you want to portray yourself, your organization, if it's not going to help your cause, often we will get requests from international media. We talked about this last week, and it's really great to talk to them, but our audience that we're trying to convince on climate action is in Australia. And so engaging with a German-speaking audience might be nice, but it's not going to help our objectives. It's not going to help our overall cause. So if we don't have a lot of time, we'll probably say no to that opportunity. You don't want to give a story oxygen. We talked about, did you remember like Peter Dutton, he's not a monster? Anytime that you talk about something that isn't real negative, that you don't want to be talking about, nuclear power is a classic one. You're giving more oxygen to a story. You might be asked to comment on something slightly controversial in your town or your area. Water rights, classic one. You might not want to give that oxygen. Sometimes if you tell the journalist you're not going to do the story, it actually means they've only got one side and they don't really have a story. Or you might be busy, you know, it's not always a good time, and we get that, like we're not getting paid for this stuff. So, you know, it's quite okay not to engage. Right. Oh, we can talk a bit more about nuclear later, that we've sort of changed that. So if you want to put in the chat just for a second, are there any things that you think you would like to engage the media with? I know some people put stuff in the chat. There's different projects. I know there was this really great turtle project we heard about last week. Obviously, Catherine's got a new art exhibition opening. That's something that might be worth engaging. Is there any issues, if you put in the chat, that you think is worth engaging with? Or if you want to come off mute and shout out. Anyone? I can't see the chat. Oh yeah, Catherine's art is amazing. Or conversely, are there any topics or stories that you wouldn't engage on? Sarah might be able to. Are there any things that Landcare wouldn't want to be talking about? Murray-Darling Basin water allocations, perhaps? Individual energy projects, perhaps? Like, what are the things that you get asked to talk about that you maybe don't?
No, not at this point. But I'm sure that people on the ground would probably get more approaches from news media than we do at this point. But yeah, I do know that wind farms is one thing where land carers have been approached and have been reluctant to comment.
100%. Peter,
Peter,
do you have a good story that you want to engage with? It could be something good that you think, yes, I'm going to engage with the media on this. Gippsland Lakes. Okay.
Mute,
all right.
unmute. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, so basically, as I've said in the chat, it's the water quality of the impact of the Gippsland Lakes, which impacts on our environment from Landcare perspective. It's a controversial issue at the moment. And as you say, you've got to pick your mark, who you talk to and who you don't talk to about it, because there are some people who will deny there's a problem and some people who will support there's a problem. You've got to pick the mark. So that's
And
me.
you probably got to pick the moment. If you're wanting to raise awareness of this as an issue, or you're wanting to discuss this, you've got to pick the right time to talk about it, to approach the media about it. You've got to think about the right media outlet. Some media outlets might not be as interested or treat the story as well as you might like. Okay, Jill, a Biolinks mindset. Ooh. Man, this is amazing, this stuff. Okay. Great. Okay. So Jill, you've got an event, something that's happening, a seminar that you would like to engage the media on. That's great. So we're going to think about more about now that we've decided to engage the media, let's say, how do you become a good contact? And now I'm going to hand over to Emily to explain how we become good contacts so we can get more press for Gippsland Lakes or more press for the half-day seminar on biolinks and revegetation stuff, which is awesome.
Thank you, Jackie. This really harks back to my very first job at a small paper in South Australia, which came out once a week, and it was about 40 pages. And I loved hearing from people like Landcare groups who had good stories about things that they were doing in the community, that had good photos. And I especially liked when I saw on my phone a number come up that I recognized, so I knew what kind of story was coming. And they were from what I called, and what journalists call, their contacts, which are really, really valuable. Knowing the right people in the community that you can go to for comment and will come to you with stories, or will be able to give you context around a story as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can become that person for journalists, either in your own local media, in your town or in your area, or at a bigger level, at a bigger sort of outlet level. And part of the reason we talk about this is because if, like me, a journalist sees that someone that they already know knows the area, and they know what their background is calling them, they're much more likely to engage with you, to pick up the phone or respond to your email if they know what kind of person they're dealing with at the other end. And yeah, it also means if they hear of something going on in the area that might be relevant, that you might be able to provide some context for, some photos for, some vision, some video, they're likely to give you a call too. And it means you don't have to do quite as much work in that reactive space if they're going to be ringing you up on their own. So I might go to the next slide, Jack. So when you're thinking about building a relationship with a journalist, the first thing you sort of quite obviously need to be thinking about is who you even want to connect with. If you want to be doing getting more stories into your local paper, for example, it's a bit of a black hole for you with current media, but you know a lot of people read it, and you know that that's where you can get your messages across. You might think that you want to contact one particular journalist who you notice does a few stories from time to time about community events, or they do stories about the environment, or they do stories that are somehow connected to the work that you're doing or that you would like to get into the media. And then you need to think about how to reach them. And this is actually a lot more straightforward than a lot of people might think. You can just ring them. You can ring a newsroom. Every single news outlet will have a newsroom phone number on their website. You can send them an email. They might have an email address for the particular journalist or for the newsroom. You can say, "Attention, Emily Watkins," in the subject line if it's a general email address, and it will usually get forwarded. And a really good time to do this is when you've got something for them. If you're contacting them the first time, it doesn't necessarily have to be a story, although a story is a good time to do this. The something you have might be a compliment. I really love that story you did on, the garden show. We're actually doing this other garden restoration, but it's all regenerated bush and it's relevant but a bit different. We'd love to show you around. Have something for them if you can. Once you've kind of built at least your first connection, the next step is to continue being a good contact. And so that means a few different things, including continuing to dole out the compliments. This might come as a shock to all of you, but journalists tend to have egos which respond very well to compliments about how excellent their journalism is. So if you've ever got any of those, that's a good way to really get in on the right side of a journo. I'm not sure if you know any journalists. I know Jackie and I love compliments. Sometimes you can also help build that relationship just by asking them for advice. You might have a story that you don't know if it's for them, if it's if it is a story yet, or what you might need for them to run it as a story. So you can ask them, look, I've got this idea. Do you think it's something you would run? What would you need for this to be a story? Do you need more contacts? Do you need photos? Do you need video? Do you need more information? Or do you think one of your colleagues or a different outlet is more likely to run it? Being open and having that give and take relationship can be a good way to continue to build that kind of relationship with a journalist. And with that in mind, and with being a good contact, giving them compliments, we talk about playing a long game with a journalist. So even if you don't get something the first time, continuing that relationship, continuing to not be a pest, not overdoing it, but sending them emails when they do good stories, giving them a call if you've got something or a bit of information that you think they might find useful, saying hi to them if you see them in the shops, those kinds of things, with the knowledge that in the future that can be a really useful relationship that can be fruitful in an ongoing way, can be really useful for you. You know, if you get one story up with a journalist, maintain that relationship, go back to them again when you see what they've done, stay in touch. Yeah, and as Jackie's kind of saying in the chat as well, a lot of young journalists like me, I don't live in Port Augusta, South Australia anymore, and I moved around a lot, but some of the contacts I had from South Australia, I maintained if they were still relevant to my work. And even if it wasn't necessarily to do stories with them, but to use their networks and connections as well. And always be gracious about the time that they're giving you. Again, if they are helpful, if they do a good job of your story, if they do put your story in the paper, just saying thank you goes a really long way with any journos, because they're busy. So just going into a little bit more detail there, when you do make first contact, you can actually just call a journalist or email them. You can connect with them on social media. You know, if they've got a work Facebook page, you can follow them and comment. If you use Twitter or LinkedIn, you could post their stories and tag them. This is a great piece by Jackie Street about Landcare programs. If you're out and about and see a journalist doing an interview, or you recognize them from their little photo in the paper, just go and say hi. They really do love being recognized, and they really like engaging with the community. A lot of particularly at smaller outlets and in regional areas, journos really love being part of the community and telling the stories of the community that they're living in and that they're serving. And then once you've made that contact, again, just maintain that contact. If they call you, even if you can't answer immediately, get back to them when you can. Be available in a reasonable time frame for them to, if they need you. Be honest about what you can and can't talk about. Don't sort of just avoid a call because it's a topic you don't want to talk about. If you want to maintain a relationship with a journo, even if they're calling you about that wind farm that you definitely don't want to talk about, still answer the phone. And when they tell you what they want to ask about, you can just say, I'm sorry, we're really not getting into that debate at the moment. If you know of someone who is able to help them, you can point them in the right direction, but always just be really clear with them, and that helps build trust. Be considerate of their time, of the effort that they might be putting in to get in touch with you, and be across the general news in your area and that might be relevant. If they ring you for a comment on a new project or a new grant that's been announced, for example, it's really helpful if they're calling you for comment that you already know something about it, that you're across what they might be asking you about. Or if you're you're hooked into the right places, and you can send them a note and say, hey, I heard the government's announcing this week, or we know this event is coming up. Will you be covering it? Would you like to talk to me, or would you like some contacts? And again, just be really generous with your compliments when they've done a story, whether you're in it or not. That really does go a really long way to having them like talking to you and using you again. Yeah, and make every time you're in touch with a journalist, make it really count. So stay ahead of the news cycle, but pay attention to what's in the news. If there's a particular publication or journalist that you're trying to maintain a relationship with, be across what they're publishing, the kinds of stories that they're doing. When you do see an opportunity, move fast. So call them as soon as you can, but only when you've got all your ducks in a row. So you don't want to ring a journalist and offer them a story when you don't actually know if the people that they might want to quote are available. You might not know if the photo they might want to take is available, or that the people in it are happy for it to be shared. Check that all those things are ready to go before you pitch a story. And yeah, if you've got pictures or images or video ideas ready, that's also a really good thing for a journalist to know, that you are someone who will come to them with a story and also say, this is what you can film. These are the best times of day to go. These are the people that will be in a photo. Those kinds of things are really useful for their planning, and just help everything move smoother and quicker. Any thoughts? Does anyone have any journo friends or contacts at your local newspapers, at the TV stations where you live? Any experiences you'd like to share?
Yes,
Right.
I will.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll get to you in a sec, Catherine. Hang on. Anyone else?
This is Peter in East Gippsland. I have had an unpleasant experience with one of the local journalists at ABC. And she has shouldn't have said she. This person has a reputation for cutting people off if she doesn't agree with the particular argument or the particular discussion that's happening. And I was talking about was in another role that I had. It was sort of counter to her personal perspective. And the interview was cut short very quickly. And I went back to some colleagues and mentioned this to them, and they said, oh yeah, who was the interviewer? And so I told them, and they said, oh yeah, that's not unusual. So I won't go back. I definitely won't go back to that particular person. I've been told that there are other people in the office that are more open-minded and a bit play a level playing field. Yes, whenever I hear this person's name now, I just sort of say, okay, that wasn't.
I mean, thanks.
And it's obviously it's not an isolated case because she has a reputation, but it was something that I just keep in my mind, and I don't think that for an ABC reporter, I don't think it was a particularly good practice.
No, thanks, Peter. Unfortunately, there are good and less good journalists right across the gamut of outlets. And it's a good example of having a think about who you actually want to have to be a good contact for, right? Being across, what someone's output is like, what the kinds of stories they do and how they treat people in interviews. And if you feel like you're not going to get a fair hearing, that's probably not a good person or the ideal person for you to be starting out with. Thanks, Peter. Sarah?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say that as also a former journalist in a little town, on a little newspaper that came out once a week. It's also really great to, if you get cold called by a journalist, to use that as a way to make a relationship, because I know that as a journalist, if I called someone from a particular group and nobody called me back, that was it. I'd put them on the blacklist and would call someone else. And another thing is just be really aware of, particularly small newspapers. Big newspapers, it's not a big deal, but deadlines. So small newspapers, they come out once a week. If they come out on a Tuesday and you're calling them on a Monday, chances are they're not going to answer the phone and come and see you. So it's just really great to just be aware of sort of timeframes and timelines of the journalists as well, because they'll obviously be working to their deadlines during the week.
That's
Yeah.
such a great point, Sarah. Thank you so much. I think, I don't know if they still do it, but the paper I worked at actually had our deadline on the editorial page inside the paper. So you could see when our print cutoff was, and you would know that morning we would not answer any phones, because as well as being reporters, this is probably the same as you, Sarah, we were photographers, we were sub-editors, we were layout sub-editors, we were doing the real estate advertorials,
Yeah.
literally everything.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All
And
right.
to what Peter said, I think, you're totally right. If you have a journalist, and we have a lot of them in different outlets, Weekly Times, you may not be surprised, has one or two journalists that I just try not to deal with. You go around them, above them, go to their chief of staff, their editor. And we've complained to the Weekly Times, hey, you're not giving us a fair go. And they said, the chief editor's like, oh, don't call that guy. Call our news editor. She'll sort it out for you. She'll get you in. And it's atrocious that that's the case, but you might have more love if you go above that person, or if you go sideways to another person, because there are blockers out there. Sorry, Em.
That's all right. Thank you, Jackie. That's a really great. I think it's a really great opportunity to hear different people's experiences, and I think it just really is a good example of why it's a good idea to think about who, if you're thinking about building contacts, know who is going to be the most useful person for you. But now we're going to talk about when you're actually pitching. So once you've got these contacts, or once you know who you want to be contacting, whether it's a cold pitch or someone you've already got a relationship with, when we talk about pitching, we're talking about the email or the conversation that you have with a journalist or an editor when you're trying to get them to cover your story or your event. So this can be reactive or it can be proactive. And the first thing you really need to be is prepared. So like I mentioned earlier, making sure you've got all your ducks in a row. You also want to know what you're going to be pitching. So thinking back to the news values that you talked about last week, what is newsworthy about this event, and think about how you're going to say that to a journalist. Why should they cover it now? What's the impact? How does this tie into other current events or other things that you're covering at the moment? And the other news values as well that also add interest and value to the story. And be ready to answer questions. So even if you don't say all of that in your first sentence, be ready for a journalist to say, when is this happening? Who is available to speak? Where is it? Is this in our local area? Why is it of interest to my readers or my viewers? If you are emailing your media release, it's always best to call or text as well. Journalists receive so many emails every day. I'm sure Sarah and Jackie would also have had in their inboxes hundreds of emails a day from people that would like to be in the paper, but also a lot of very spammy emails from people that are just doing what we call a spray and pray, sending an email to literally every journalist whose email address they can get. So there's a lot to sort through, and it's really easy for yours to be missed. And it's not because they don't necessarily care or want to read it. It's just because they can't read everything. So if you if you are emailing, think about if you've got their mobile number, give them a mobile call or a text. But like I said earlier, every outlet has a phone number where you can call the newsroom on their website. So you can give them a call. And it can be as simple as your pitch again, or it can be, I'm calling to make sure you've seen my email. It's about this. So back to the news values. These, I think we went through these last week, but in brief for anyone who missed it and as a refresher, these are the 8 news values that journalists learn at uni or as part of their cadetships around what actually makes news. And this changes according to the outlet, but the values themselves don't change, sorry, but what makes up those values can change. So we talk about impact. So how big is the impact of this? How many people does it affect? We talk about timeliness. So why would a journalist cover this now instead of, say, in 3 months? Is it something that's happening today or happened yesterday? Why is it of interest at this moment for this edition of the paper? And currency is how it ties into current events. So one thing we talk about a lot at the moment is cost of living. If you can connect it into cost of living, that will often boost its news value, but also things like the weather. If it's it's been an extremely hot summer or an extremely wet year like we had a couple of years ago. Current topics are the kinds of things that might boost the value. Proximity, how close is it? So is it something that's happening near us right now? Is it in our town? Is it in the next town over? Is it in Melbourne? The further away it is, the less of this value that it will hold. Do you have someone prominent? And again, this can change according to the publication. So the local mayor in your town or area would be prominent for your local paper, but maybe not for the Sydney Morning Herald, for example. So this can shift a little, and you would use your judgment on who is prominent for the audience that you're trying to reach. Novelty is a element of uniqueness. So we sometimes talk about the biggest or the best or the first, those kind of descriptors that give your story something new and different that might not have been seen before in your town or at all. Human interest is your case studies, probably, or sometimes some of you that bring a human face to the story that you're trying to tell and share. And when you're talking about conflict, often journalists will bring this in themselves, and it's part of the reason you'll often have both sides. They'll go to the opposition spokesperson for the environment for comment to counter what the bulk of the story is saying, or it could just be implicit in the story that there's some kind of conflict. But most of the time we wouldn't suggest you bring it in yourself. It will usually be there in some way. So when you're pitching, if you're pitching to a daily newspaper or TV or radio, it's best to pitch in the mornings. Most daily newspapers would have a news conference around 9:30. If you're pitching into a radio program, it changes during the day depending on what time the program starts. So they'll have different sort of timed news meetings. And TV is, the regional ones are usually start a bit earlier because they have to file a bit earlier. So before 9, but usually you'd be trying to be pitching before 10 for a story for that day. This obviously changes if you're pitching to a weekly newspaper, like we were saying before. You would look at the day it comes out, and probably the day it comes out is a really good day to be pitching. I know for our paper, that is when we would go for lunch and have a lovely time, and then we'd look at all the emails that we hadn't read in the past 2 days and think about the stories for the next week.
No
Yeah.
lunches at ABC. Jeez.
Oh, really impressed. We'd go
Lunch.
to the Flinders Hotel and have a schnitty. Give as much lead time as you can. So if you know if something's coming, let a journalist know. As soon as you've got everything kind of like in mind, you know what's happening, give them as much time as you can to sort themselves out. Keep it short and sweet. Include all the detail you have to, but they're not going to read several pages of background on your project. They're just not going to. So keep it as brief as you can. Some dot points are often really useful just to really focus the eye on what they really should be caring about. Personalize it. Don't accidentally, as One Today chief of staff said in a presentation I went to, happens to him very regularly, where he gets pictures that say, "Hi, Josh, I thought this would be of interest for your Sunrise viewers." And he immediately deletes the email because they've got the name of the show wrong, and worse, it's their bitter rival. So just be conscious of who you're pitching to and personalize it for them, and be credible. So you obviously want to sell your story, but you don't want to oversell it in a way that it's no longer true. So keep it all. Don't get carried away with yourself when you're pitching. And again, timing is really, really important. So for daily papers, just avoid Friday afternoon. All the journos just want to get out of there. They probably will have had a lot of the news for Saturday's paper already in the bed earlier in the week. They plan ahead for the weekend papers. If you're pitching to TV or radio, don't be calling when a bulletin's going to air. Don't call the ABC newsroom when their midday news bulletin is on. Wait until it's finished. And if there's a big news event, if there's been a big car crash, or there's flooding, or something is happening in your town or the area that the outlet covers, there's no point pitching at that time. All the journalists will be busy covering something else. So just be aware of what else is going on around your story. Keep it relevant. So be aware of what that outlet covers. And if there's no chance they've ever covered anything like your story, don't waste their time by pitching it if you haven't thought about why they would cover it. Again, don't get too complicated. Just keep it simple. And you probably heard me mention this PR phrase, spray and pray, earlier, which is when you just send your media release out to everyone you can think of, no matter how relevant your pitch is, and hope for the best, hope to just catch a few hits. It's not usually very successful. You're usually much better off being focused, thinking about who you're pitching to and why, and focusing on sending a personalized pitch to those outlets only.
There are some exceptions to the Friday rule that I have found. That includes opinion pieces for Monday morning. The opinion editors are actually okay to hear from people on a Friday. And ABC locally, they often have programs on a Saturday morning. They might have if your ABC has a local Saturday program, they always struggle to fill it. So if you contact them on a Thursday or a Friday, they might be open to that. Also, we used to fill our Monday morning. We used to have little radio news bulletins locally, and we used to fill those for Monday on a Friday. So I say for papers, Friday afternoon, don't bother, but it depends on your local radio station so this is where it comes to getting to know you have to listen to your local radio station before you pitch them to get a sense of, you know, how they organise themselves.
And this also goes back to earlier talking about building relationships with journalists and asking them advice. That's something they really love to hear as well. If you're just getting to know a journalist, if you say, when is the best time to pitch you? When would you like to hear from me? And when would you really not like to hear from me? And just keeping that in mind and respecting that. That's a really not considerate thing to check in on. Yeah. This is an example of an email pitch, which will be in the slides that are shared with you. I might not read it out from
we got to move on.
But it's a good example of a really simple pitch that doesn't get into too much detail. It is fake. I should be clear in case it wasn't obvious, but it's got who we are, why you might be interested in it, what is the news story, what we can give you. So here are a few dot points of what you can have if you do this story, and a nice little compliment at the end there, and a sign off. So there's no need to get into too much detail, and you can read that later on when you review the slides. If you haven't heard back from a pitch, always follow up after a couple of hours is okay for daily. You might leave it a little bit longer if it's an opinion piece or if it's not a daily program. Be prepared to do it again. So if you are ringing to check that they've seen your email, be prepared, have your answers to all those questions. Don't be too let down if you get a rejection. This happens all the time. Jackie and I are rejected all the time with our stories. And look at us. We are still here and we get back up again. And just keep trying. Think about, you can always ask. You may or may not get it, but you can always ask why your pitch wasn't accepted. And think about different ways you could word it and maybe pitching it somewhere else. So make your pitches newsworthy. Pitch in the mornings. We need to put a little asterisk on that dot point for all those caveats we had about when else you might pitch. Give lead time if you can. Keep it short. Personalize it. Get the outlet right. Be credible and follow up to see what's happening.
Okay, so I was going to talk about media releases, but I think the main event that we're all keen to hear about is Catherine and her experience. So I'm just going to skip to that bit. And Catherine, this is all right. These are two stories here. I'm going to just stop sharing and redo it so we can walk through these stories. So the first one is an ABC story that actually, this is amazing to me because it has not one, not two, but four, I think, Landcare people in it, which is incredible. And let's try and, here we go. Can you guys all see this? So, can you see that okay, or do I need to zoom in a bit? So this is an ABC story. Catherine, do you want to walk us through? So this is about gardeners planting firewise species in gardens and the planting of a belt of firewise plants at the primary school. Catherine, do you want to talk a bit about how did you get the ABC interested in this?
Well, I think the important thing to say is that from the very beginning, this was a collaborative project. And I tuned in to what's called, and you can see it on, there's web links, the Lakes Entrance Community Landcare set up a project last year called Green Walls Fire Kit. And it's a wonderful audio-visual kit with all sorts of references of plants and important information. I went to that launch. And while I was at the launch, I thought this really needs to be grounded on country in a garden. So people need to be able to see this demonstrated. So it's not just an abstract, isn't this lovely, do this. So I'd already had a relationship with the Nungurna Primary School, and in fact, we developed a plan for a children's play space. And behind that children's play space is this area of land. And so because of my negotiations with the school principal, and because of my relationship with Nungurna Landcare and the CFA, I'd already got this series of relationships. They were really interested in developing a Firewise garden. So we grounded this kit, which any community can use. And so my job was really to connect with the local journalist, and she was fascinated because she knew that she was going to have a good time when we invited her to an event. So we invited her to the launch of this event. She knew it was going to be fun. So my point is that, you know, doing abstract stuff is a waste of time. You've got to give people fun and an experience, particularly when you're dealing with difficult issues of biodiversity loss, you know, natural disasters, etc., etc. We've got to really build the joy in the community. And I think that's absolutely critical. So this journalist came, you could tell she was smiling, the kids were singing, we had the kids singing, cool burning. We had, it was absolutely wonderful. That's a photo of Heather Oak, who is a local resident. So the important thing is that you connect with your local Landcare, the local Landcare connected with the CFA, and also the regional, there's the CFA people, and also the regional Landcare network, you know, it was the East Gippsland Landcare network.
So in this story, and this is something worth thinking about, Millie Spencer from ABC has spoken to yourself, Catherine. She's also spoken to Heather Oak there. So that's 2. We've got Josh Puglisi. Is he here tonight? He was here last week. That's 3. And then also
Josh is from the Far East Landcare group, network group, the Far East group.
And
this
and Jess Berry as well. So that's 4.
Bury. Yes.
Bury.
The Burys are a very well-known family in Nungurna. So you've got to. It's
and then she's also spoken to Jeff Morris as well from the CFS. That's 5 people she's spoken to for this story. So having more than one person is important, right?
Yes, and that's where the power is, because the journalist wants to feel the vibe. And the vibe was, wow, these people are really working together. They're really making a difference. People really need to know that you're making a difference. That's the important thing when you pitch for an article.
Another article, this is interesting to me because I would say as a journalist that I actually prefer this other article with the Lakes Post in a way, and I'll see if I can share that one, because this one actually, because Millie from ABC didn't include the lovely kids, which I think is, can you guys see this one here now, Lakes Post? Which I think is actually, this photo grabs me a bit more personally. Because I feel it tells a bit more of a story. It's very cute there with the kids. So did you provide these photos, Catherine, or did they come and take them?
The local journalists, Bairnsdale Advertiser and Lakes Post, it's the, whatever the media is, the media company is, she came and took it, and she talked to people. This is a fabulous photo of a demonstration of the burning of Seabury saltbush. So the kids could see the difference. If the Seabury saltbush actually doesn't burn, it steams. And so this was a real life example of slowing down bushfires. So in this article, we really were keen to say that Firewise Gardens don't stop bushfires, they slow them down. And here was a physical demonstration. And so it's all about building community. What happened was, this is Phil Vaughan, who is the local Landcare coordinator. one of them. And he was showing this demonstration using an oxyacetylene torch, burning Seabury saltbush and then comparing it to other eucalypts around the place. And the kids could see this and they were going, wow. And then what happened was other people have started to do this demonstration in other situations. So it's spreading.
And did you reach out to these outlets to let them know that this was and invite them along? You already had an event, obviously,
Yes,
which is great. So you then invited the journalists to come along and
yes, we invite all the papers. And this woman from Yates Media, that's who it is.
Yates Media.
We've got a relationship with her, so she comes every time, because after this we had an opening, we also had a launch. This was the launch. We had an opening, and we had, there may be in one of the other articles I sent you, one of the other links I sent you, we had a smoking ceremony, we had the Koori engagement support officers. It was fabulous. We had a lot of people there, and it's made a really big difference.
And did you feel like the media were treating your story fairly, I suppose? Because that's something that we've been talking about tonight, because it can be difficult. Like they sometimes, you have to work quite hard sometimes to make sure the media are on the right track. And that's about talking. We talked last week about talking really simply, writing really simply. All your material information for the press needs to be aimed at a person aged 12 or even younger. Like, keep your language simple so they don't get the wrong end of the stick. Did you feel like they were respectful and they got the right story?
Well, I think it's up to you as the, if you're promoting the idea, you've got to be very solid in your thinking about the validity of your idea. You've got to be convinced of your own idea, and you've got to have evidence, and you've got to have the right simple statistics and information. Like you're saying, you've got to be prepared. So we've got to be prepared about, the natural disasters, the risk of bushfires, how many houses were damaged last 2020 or whenever it was. You've got to have your evidence. You can't be flimsy. You've got to be solid. And I think when you are that, and you're working as a team, the journalist picks up your good energy and they go, wow, this is going to make a difference. So it's about being positive. It's having your evidence, and it's about having the team, because you're not on your own. I don't think it's about convincing an individual. I think it's about pushing a line of evidence, you've really got to push the urgency of the dilemma that you're addressing. That was another point I wanted to make, is that when you are addressing the media, you need to articulate dilemmas and your solutions to the dilemmas. Yeah. It's irrefutable. You're going to get the interest.
Amazing. And, I also love this because, for me, my work is all about climate, and there's some really powerful climate stories and links in this. So bravo, Catherine. We might have another chance to ask Catherine more questions at the end. I'm just going to speed in 2 minutes very quickly through writing press releases so we can get on to the fun stuff, which is getting your opinions published. A media release, for me, I work with a lot of different people, and they spend years on media releases. And as a journalist, I never read them, hardly ever. For me, it was an invitation to call someone, because at the ABC, if you ever copied text from a media release, you were slapped on the wrist. That was never to be done. So a media release for me is an invitation. It doesn't have to be a perfect piece of work of art. We work with all kinds of groups, and they make them into these bigger than Ben-Hur things. And really, it just needs to be a simple summary of your story, the information that the journalist is going to need to write the story, the when, where's, what's the group called, spelling correctly, the names of people spelt correctly. It's really important to have those details correct. But you don't need to go on into great weighty tomes. You might give them, you might have a website or a Facebook page or something you can link to and say, for more information or for more background about this, you can go to this link if they're really keen. Remembering that that's not an inaccurate, I had more than 50,000 unread emails at ABC because I just didn't read a lot of the press releases that came across my desk. You're competing with a lot of noise, maybe not quite so much in the small papers, but that's why having the relationship that we talked about earlier is so good, because if they see your name and they know you, they might look at that release and they won't look at, you know, boring Baggins next press release beneath you. Get their attention. This press release on the right was just, the headline that it had on it was, Sweltering Cities launches campaign to get people to something or other, blah. There was a quote down in it that said, it's time to call your nan. And I said, that's the headline. Let's put that in the headline. And what putting a punchy headline like that, call your nan, that was an invitation to a whole bunch of media that group didn't normally get, because your commercial radios and commercial TV saw that and went, oh yeah, like, cool, I get it, call you now. Like, you know, it was part of the release. It wasn't something made up, but we highlighted that, and that was a attention-grabbing headline. So you might want to think about that. You know, the Firewise Garden, that's quite a nice thing in itself. You probably don't need to embellish that a whole heap. Get to the point, highlight the information, keep things very clear. It's a bit hard to see, but there's 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, and then it gets to the first quote. So not a lot of information in this press release. It gets straight to the point, and then there's like quotes explaining it. Don't use jargon. People don't know what Landcare Developer Coordinator is. People don't know what, you know, soil carbon necessarily means. People don't know. You've got to assume that you're talking to your niece or nephew who's 12, who's never heard of this before. Journalists don't have time necessarily to be across every single topic. Try and keep their attention using quotes, using factual language, no longer than a page. If your press release, a page and a half at most, on an email, we've got infinite space, right? We could write forever, but the journalist's not going to scroll that far. Have a clear call to action. Like, why are you sending this press release? What do you want the story to be? What are the you know, obviously the Firewise Garden, that's pretty obvious, you know, it's an event you're asking them to attend, but also the whole point of the event, as Catherine was explaining, was to really make that connection between the problem and the solution. Most importantly for me, my absolute bugbear when I was a journalist, could not stand, and Sarah and Emily will probably back me up on this, if you send out a press release, have your phone ready. Don't have it on silent, be ready. You might get a call straight away. Sometimes journalists are sitting around and they'll get you and they'll call you. If you do not answer the phone or call them back within a reasonable time, it's really annoying. There was nothing more irritating than someone, the University of Sunshine Coast were just notorious. They'd send out press releases and then leave their desk and go home for the day. Why? Why are you sending out a press release if you're not taking the number? So taking calls. So always be available for at least for them to contact you to tee up something. If you're not going to be available, and I have this all the time with the groups that we work with, and I say to them, who's the contact? Why are you putting out a press release? And they're like, oh, we don't know. I'm like, well, you got to sort that out before you put out your press release. Unless someone's ready to take calls, you're not going to get radio and TV interviews. And a lot of print people, news-wise, they want to talk to you too, to maybe get an explanation. They're not just going to print what you put in the release. Well, they shouldn't. Sometimes they do, but news-wise sometimes do, but
And
rarely.
a lot of regional papers do.
Oh, regional papers, that's true. They do. But you can't just expect that they're going to, right? You need to be ready to be called. So it's okay if you wait a day to put out your release if you're too busy, or wait a week, a month, whatever it is. if it doesn't matter for the timing of your thing, don't put out something if you can't take the call. Thinking about, and Catherine obviously had thought about this, you know, what can they film and photograph? There's lovely pics of the garden, the people there, the kids learning about the fire. What other things can you give them? Do you have reports or website links? Do you have, you know, other things the journalists can look at, or a hard drive, sorry, not hard drive, a link to a drive of photos. So yes. Okay. So Em, I'm going to hand over to you now to talk about the fun stuff.
Thank you. And I'll pay attention to the agenda this time. So I will do it in a good amount of time. So we've mostly been talking about news, as Jackie mentioned at the beginning, where we're talking about TV news, radio news, or the front part of the paper, which is stories that a journalist has written about your event or something that is happening. Some other ways that you can get particularly into your regional papers are just getting your opinion straight in there as an opinion piece or a letter to the editor. So, Jackie, next slide, please. Newspapers especially really love to have other informed voices from the community in their paper. So they like having a fresh perspective, a fresh voice that's talking to its readers about something topical. And so if you are passionate and you have some kind of expertise or experience on a topic, you could be exactly what they're looking for to add colour, interest and engagement to their paper. So next slide, please. If you are thinking that this is you, you need to be thinking about what you actually have to say. Do you have something to say that contributes to your goal? So it's going back to, again, what Jackie was talking about earlier in terms of what do we engage on and what do we not engage on? Do I have an idea on something that's important to our group that I can share? And in that vein also, you need to be thinking about, why am I the person to say this thing? Is it because of my experience in my Landcare group? Is it because of my experience as a teacher combined with my Landcare experience? What is it about me that gives me a unique and interesting perspective on this particular topic? And what's my best way to say it? Is it an opinion piece or is it a letter? Thinking about who you want to reach. So who is the audience I'm trying to reach? If it's your local audience, then probably your local paper is a really great place to start. So we'll break down a little bit the difference between opinion pieces, op-eds, and letters to the editor. Starting with letters to the editor. So this is from, I think that looks like the Age or that would be the Age letters page. And you've probably all, if you've ever opened a paper, even if you haven't read them, seen the letters to the editor, which run with other opinion pieces in the paper. And they're an opportunity for you very easily to have your opinion shared in the newspaper on a topic that is of interest to you, that is important to you, and they can be really valuable, right? So a lot of people are regular letters to the editor writers. Some of you might have written letters in the past, and those people also read them, but the other people that read them are politicians. They have searches for particular words, keywords for every newspaper in the country. Business leaders, big organizations, big companies monitor trends. They monitor what people are writing letters about and the kinds of views that are coming up. So it can be a really valuable and quite easy way to insert your voice into the conversation. But you're always most likely to be published by responding in a timely manner. Are you picking up on a theme here? You have to be ready and you have to respond quickly to get into the news on topical issues. So some reasons that you might write a letter to the editor is to educate. If you've seen something factually wrong or you want to inform the public about something, you might write a letter to the editor. I saw an article that Millie wrote this week about this. She did a great job of some bits, but actually this is what happened or what our view is. You can correct something by using a letter to the editor, or if you spot misinformation in the same vein, you can write a letter to counter it. You might be adding to the debate. You might have seen an article and you just have one quick thought. In addition to this program, we also have this local program where we are doing this and we've seen some really great benefits. Or you might just be holding decision makers accountable. There might be something that your local member has said that about a new policy that you want to counter, and this is a really great way to have that view heard, remembering that they will be monitoring the letters pages. So I won't go through these, but this is a list that one of our contacts who works with a very prolific letter writing group on climate issues who shared some of her intel with us on some of the papers that have letters columns in order of her success in terms of getting them in the paper. Obviously, if we're talking local issues and you are a local person, you are most likely to have success in your local paper. But that is not to say that you don't have success writing to other publications outside your area as well. This group that I'm talking about, they have people from all over Australia and they write to publications all over Australia with similar kinds of success. And these were some of her tips about how to write a really great letter to the editor. Every publication has guidelines of what they would like in a letter to the editor. It might be on their website or it might be in the paper itself on the letters page. So always have a look at that first. That will tell you how long it should be, which is usually 100 to 200 words, who to write it to and what to include. Think really hard about your opening line when you've got a very short word length. You want to get in there really quick. You don't want to dilly-dally around getting to the point and getting people to read. If you're referring to an article, always refer to it. You'll see in this example here in the first sentence, she's got in brackets the name of the article and the date that the letter is in response to. Remember who you're talking to. So a letter for the Australian Financial Review might have a bit of a different vibe to your local paper, for example. Keep it short, be personal. If you can bring in your own experience and really try to connect with the reader, it's going to be a bit more successful and more likely to get a run. Always be polite. Anything aggressive or abusive will just not get a run, and it doesn't necessarily show you in a good light, even if it does. Get your facts right. Have an opinion in it. They're not going to run a letter to the editor that just states a series of facts for the most part. Bring something of yourself and your own opinion to it. Sign off with your name, your suburb, and include your address. This doesn't get published, and your phone number. It doesn't get published, but letters editors verify that the people that are writing to them exist. So they'll check, but that's what they use that for. They don't use it to publish. And always proofread. And if you can, have someone else proofread it for you as well. A lot of groups will do letter writing campaigns, which can be really useful if you've got group members that are engaged, that you want to encourage to write more letters, and that can be successful. But if you are doing this, we discourage getting them to send form letters, templates that are all exactly the same. Don't do that. They won't get a run. They'll just annoy editors. So if you're writing an opinion piece, on the other hand, a letter is a few hundred, 100 or 200 words maximum, whereas an opinion piece is a full piece. So to justify an opinion piece, you really need enough to say to support a 600 to 800 words. So you need to find the right audience, know who you are pitching a story to, and write for the outlet that your audience is at. If you're responding to a particular article or opinion piece, you usually start with that publication, but also think about whether this has a national audience, a metro audience, a specialist audience, your local paper, and read the opinion pieces in the outlet that you're pitching to. And these, I think, will be in the slides for you to review back, but that we just have a few examples of some really strong opening lines to opinion pieces that might just give you a bit of an idea, if you are having a go, of the kinds of things that might grab attention.
It's fair to say drama, a bit of drama. Does it go straight?
Bring the drama, yeah.
Yeah.
So look, a lot of the same principles apply no matter what kind of writing you're doing, but you want it to be clear and direct. But with an opinion piece, you'll be using first person. You'll be trying to entertain and inform the reader. You want to be backing up your facts, make sure everything is right, and have one core idea that is a thread that runs throughout the entire piece. Don't try to fit too much in, say every single thing that you know and have ever known, because it's not as easy to follow. Oof. Any questions about opinion pieces?
Or anything else? We are now open for questions. We've got a few minutes before we wrap up. Thank you, Em. Sorry to rush you through that last take there. So much to talk about. We've covered a lot of ground. I don't know if anyone has any more questions for Catherine. I thought Catherine's experience is really interesting. That obviously, you know, having something, we talked about those news values, having something really compelling with an event like that, you know, because the pictures are lovely, like little kids learning about a bush garden or a firewise garden, but the background to that, the story behind that story is obviously really confronting and compelling, because you're talking about bushfires and you're talking about climate change. So, you know, having your ducks in a row ideas. Is anybody had any thoughts bubbling up, seeing that, you know, I know Jill, you've got an event coming up. Sorry to pick on you, Jill. You know, has this changed anything at all, the way you're thinking about maybe approaching media, or is it just confirmed, you know, the tactics that you were already thinking of, perhaps? Is Jill still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I think that it probably can you hear? I'm not on mute, am I?
Yeah,
I think it's probably confirmation more than new things, but it is that interesting thing that we had a change of editor after you've, in the local paper, after you've met the editor, of how it is you have to keep going with that work. And I think part of it, with everything, I almost get a bit tired thinking about it, because it's one thing when it's your job and you're the media person, the comms person.
Yeah.
But it feels a little bit like a potential full-time job.
Yes.
But that's just the way it is, isn't it?
It is. It's a lot of work.
Yep.
And yeah, the editor moves on. The young journalist that you've befriended moves on after a couple of months. It's very annoying, and you've got to start again. But you've just got to hope that sometimes and journalists are they're not very good at sharing, and they're a bit competitive even with people in their own outlet, but we did used to share contacts at ABC. So, you know, my colleagues would be like, oh, Jill from Landcare, give her a call. She knows everything. She's great. She's always answers the phone. And so even if you could be a good contact, you might find that other journalists might ring you as well. If you are reliable in answering the phone and give them what they need, you know, some grabs or some lines, or a good contact, you know, best thing you can do if you don't want to talk is palm it off to someone else who's a good talker. Always journalists like that.
A lot of newsrooms now have shared contact books that, you know, last forever. So that's also, if you're really good and someone's moving on, they might think, you know what, I'm gonna, as my parting gift to the newsroom, I'm gonna leave all the future reporters Jill's number.
But it is a lot of work, Jill, and there are things you can do to make it a bit less work. You might, and people will do this, it's not that bad, just send an email, like get the contacts of all the press and send one email inviting them all to the thing. And then think about the one or two at most outlets that you really want to come and call them. If you don't have time to call everyone, just make one call or one text and email them all one email, BCC, blind copy them in to what, so you're only sending one email to 20 people or whatever. If you have a little list in a document somewhere, that's we have many lists, you know, and then you could just spam them with one email to try and make it a bit less, because it's a lot.
Oh, it's not that. I mean, in a rural area, rural regional, it's not as if there's lots of media outlets.
That's true.
And so, yeah, it's just, I think, more that when you are juggling your work in all sorts of other ways in Landcare, you know, we tend to be people who are wearing lots of different hats. Fine, great. And I think it's one thing we would love to do is to have somebody who's our volunteer communications coordinator.
Yes.
Let them just do that and
Great
not be
idea.
having to worry about everything else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's bodies on the ground which become the issue there.
Yeah.
If you ever need some support with creating content or anything like that, you can always contact me as well, and I can help you if I can.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, that's always an option for you. If you need some help pulling a media release together and you've just got the dot points, I can help you put it together or anything like that. Happy to help.
Thank you.
And if media are contacting you for stuff, you're allowed to say no. I'm sorry, I'm at work. I'm sorry, I'm too busy. But I'd rather talk. Can we talk at this other time that's when you're not going to be as busy, and take control. If the media is contacting you, they're asking you for a favor. So you can push back on them a bit more. If we're contacting the media and asking, asking them to do stuff, it's a bit harder because we're inviting them to do something. And then if we make it hard for them, they're not going to bother again. You know, and you might not need media. That's another question. One of the big things, even though I'm obviously like, oh, do media. You know, one of the big points I want everyone to take away with is you don't ever have to do media, right? It's usually a nice to have thing. It's not, and if you're finding it super stressful, you might want to think about, do we really need, is this going to advance our goals? If you think it really is, then maybe, but you know, it's none of it is compulsory by any means, especially if you're volunteering. Catherine, I can't hear you. Can you come off mute? I don't think I can unmute you.
Hello, yes. I'm very aware that every situation is so different, and every Landcare group and everyone's got different kind of events or dilemmas that they're dealing with. I just was thinking as we were, listening to you all talk, I'm wondering if Landcare, National Landcare, another idea for a webinar could be that individuals bring their dilemmas or their questions or their events, and you as a panel and people in the audience as well could respond to that dilemma or problem, and that we could, you know, problem solve a particular situation, rather than, you know, this is the way to do it, or try this or try that. That you've got a whole group of us who are working collaboratively to solve a particular problem or a dilemma, or create, you know, a media case for an event. I'm just wondering if
brains
that's
trust.
another possibility for a future Landcare. I've really enjoyed this presentation, but I'm just wondering if we could, you know, all collaborate in an interactive way. I'm just aware that the audience here also would have quite a lot of experience with media presentation, as well as, you know, you journalists. So I'm just wondering if what other people feel about that.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. That is definitely something we try to achieve with these webinars as well, creating an opportunity for a dialogue between groups and exploring some solutions. Sometimes we have done previous webinars, I've definitely done that, where, you know, we had webinars about roles and responsibilities, for example, where we had a few people came in and talked about their experiences and exchanged through the chat, or through here, what has happened to them. Yeah, it is hard, I guess. I mean, it is a great idea, and it's something we're trying to figure out how to do it, either through a webinar or another. But it's definitely a great idea, and that's definitely something we want to achieve with these webinars as well. So peer-to-peer learning, we recognize that is really important for groups. Thanks. That is a great idea.
There's just one more thing I wanted to mention too, is that your emphasis has been on print media, and I'm just noticing that we haven't really talked about social media, and I'm just aware of a generational difference with the, you know, the people who read papers and don't read papers, and people who are onto Facebook and TikTok and all the rest of it. And I think that would be another really good presentation, and an interactive possibility of, you know, presenting, you know, events or whatever, and how would we deal with Facebook, or what's some good experiences of TikTok, you know, not Twitter anymore, but whatever, you know.
Social media is a whole other kettle of fish. It is its own thing, and we deliberately don't talk about that anymore. We are looking at developing some resources and courses around that ourselves, but we don't have them as yet. There are potentially other places that can do social media training, but it is a really, really big thing, and definitely something that I'm sure people are keen as beans for.
And Jackie, on that, by the way, we do have an evaluation form that will come up as soon as you close up the Zoom today, and will come up, and you have a section there that you can actually tell us what sort of things you want us to do. We do have an idea because we have done a survey last year, but, you know, pop in there anything else that you might think will be worth for us to do as part of a workshop or webinar. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, just to finish up, really, we've talked about all these things, thinking about why and when you're going to engage with the media, when you're not, thinking about how to make connections. Best way is to just call or email to start off a dialogue. When you're making your pitch, think about when you're pitching, what else is happening around you, writing a media release, keeping it simple, making it with a punchy headline to get attention. Make your opinion count. With a letter to the editors can be just as effective or more effective even than an opinion piece, but opinion piece, or op-eds we call them, need to be really nicely structured, really short, often 400 to 600 words, and just about one singular idea, and keeping things in a writing style that reflects your voice, but it's also quite straightforward. So thank you very much, everyone. If you ever, and we'll send this, info@climatemediacentre.org.au is a place you can email and ask for help as well. We can't always guarantee. It does need to be climate related. But we do get requests from different people from time to time through there. And Anna might just want to wrap up
Yep.
and talk about what's happening next. Sorry, I realise we're at time.
Yep, we have time, so I will be very quickly with this. You will get the slides, so this information will be sent to you tomorrow. But these are some of the next webinars we have coming up. They are all very relevant to a lot of you. I also want to thank Jackie and Emily and Rebecca as well. She was here last week for delivering these webinars. This was a partnership. There was no charging for this. So I really appreciate your help with this. It was all very relevant to us in land care. Also want to thank Sarah for supporting me today in this webinar, and especially to all of you. I know some of you have returned from last week, and for staying in until tonight. The next one will be on the 26th if you're interested in gorse. Gorse will be the next one, gorse and fire actually. So yeah, and thanks so much. Please fill in the feedback after this. It's really important to us, and I'll see you next time, and yeah, have a good night.